And we're live. It is Tuesday. It is the 15th of July. It is the year of our Lord 2025, and I am a minute and a half late today, and I want to tell you why I'm a minute and a half late today. I was here. I was on time. As you can see, I'm coming to you from the cabin in the woods, aka the dacha, as Nastia calls it. And I hit go, the what used to be called the blue go live button, and used to cause me anxiety, and now does not cause me any anxiety, and is not blue anymore, and does not say go live. It just says, record or something. And so there's a lot less drama associated with it. I hit it and went live and started this little monologue about how I'm here at the cabin in the woods, and it's the first time I've slept there in quite a while. And what happened? I looked up to see how many people were joining me today. I look up and the number is 19, and there was no number. And I realized that I was talking to myself in a Riverside screen, which is an unfortunate thing when you realize that you think you have an audience of 20 or 25 people and nobody's there. And the reason nobody's there is that I was not in the Dogshirt TV 2025 studio. I was in something called Ben's studio, which I use when I am recording podcasts remotely or running recording myself. I use it when I'm recording advertising, all those little ads for select quote and delete me, and they all get recorded in Ben's studio. And one of the things about Ben's studio is that it generally doesn't record video, it only records the audio. And another one of the things about Ben's studio is that nobody else has an invitation to join it except when they're recording podcasts with me, and most importantly, the audience of Dogshirt TV doesn't have access to it. And therefore, you guys, for a minute and a half, were sitting in here waiting for me to hit what used to be called the blue go live button and no longer is. And I was in Ben's studio talking to myself, and so feeling a little sheepish. I hit that red stop button and switched studios, and I am here a minute late at the cabin in the woods where I slept last night. I am here because I am awaiting the delivery of the new cabin's first piece of furniture, which is a bed. And today a bed will arrive, and I am going to sit around and wait for it. I'm going to sip coffee on the porch of the cabin. You'll recall that the last time I came to you from this porch, I think, was the day that Kate Klonick and I blew up my computer with Baby Cannon. And, the Canon, the cabin in the woods has gone through a lot since then. Major flood, destruction, overtaken by black mold. But it is rebuilding now, and it has a fireplace hearth that I put in. The upstairs has the Canadian hardwood floors. The downstairs almost has a complete working bathroom. I may, depending on how I'm feeling today, do some tiling, work on that bathroom. So as of now, I can sleep at the cabin in the woods and still, get up and brush my teeth and, don't have to use the woods part of the cabin in the woods to go to the bathroom. It's all very exciting. I am mostly taking the day off today. I'm going to do some cabining, some tiling. I'm going to think I don't think any big thoughts, but maybe some moderate-sized thoughts. And I'm going to be try to do as little lawfare work as possible, other than essential meetings. I apologize for the somewhat wobbly camera situation here. I'm not sure. I don't think it's the deck that's doing. Yeah, it's actually movement in the table that this is on. It's causing the camera to wobble a little bit. I apologize for that. And so we are going to be joined, I believe, by at least one co-host today. And in the meantime, I want to talk about Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. So let's start with the fact that this is the Iran-Iraq war. These are all people of uncommon malevolence, and that means that in any battle between them, the proper thing to do is to arm both sides and encourage the fight. Every moment that Dan Bongino spends fretting to Laura Loomer about Pam Bondi is a moment he can't spend doing a witch hunt against people like Mike Feinberg. Every moment that Kash Patel spends in Trump's bad graces as a result of I don't know why Kash Patel is now on the outs, except that he's fighting with Pam Bondi and seems to be on, I mean, I can't even tell. It's like the freaking Real Housewives of the Justice Department over there. And no, that's not a comment on Pam Bondi's looks or aesthetic. It is a comment on all of their behavior. I've never seen an episode of Real Housewives of anything, but I gotta say this is kind of what I imagine it to be like. Every moment that Kash Patel spends worrying about whether he's still the wizard Kash and on Trump's side is a moment that he cannot spend purging the FBI. And the thought that Pam Bondi's head is being demanded at Talking Points USA, and she is having to spend her time defending her job is great, because the last thing we want in an attorney general of her nature is a sense of job security, that she could, ride this out and, the more unbalanced she feels, the less sure-footed, the less damage she will do in the meantime. I have only one complaint about this situation, and that's that it doesn't include enough people. So we have not drawn into the fight Mr. Mr. Todd Blanche, for example. He doesn't seem involved. That's a problem, because he's busy firing people like Erez Rivani, and he needs to be brought down a few pegs. And I think the Epstein files should metastasize so as to envelop him. And by the way, why not include the sepulchral Emil Bovy in this fight? I mean, he is so unpleasant and such a terrible presence. I think he desperately needs to be enveloped in a conspiratorial cloud of total nonsense. So here is my message to them all: keep up the good work, keep going after each other. And I don't care like the merits of it. It's not, I don't care who's right. I don't think any of them is right, by the way. Um, uh, Keep it up. Keep the attacks going. Keep accusing each other of things, whether it's accurate or not. I don't care. Um, Keep it going. The more we keep this going, and it's not really we that's keeping us going. That's the great thing about the Iran-Iraq war. They do all the fighting. All we have to do is sit back and occasionally, sell some arms to the Iranians, for example, to in exchange for hostages, and maybe divert the funds to the Nicaraguan Contras. That's all we need to do. The Saudis, keep the Iraqis in the fight. This is what we need to do, people. Keep them fighting with each other. Because remember, and you can attribute this to me, when they're fighting with each other, they're not coming for us. That is the slogan of all opposition to the Trump administration. If they're fighting with each other, they're not coming for you. And that could be, by the way, the slogan of the nation of Canada right now. If they're fighting with each other, they're not invading us. Ev Gaumond, you are a black rectangle on my screen, but it's lovely to.
I'm a black rectangle on my screen as well. It's far from voluntary. Uh, I don't understand why Riverside has to make that many updates. Every time I try to log on the show, it has to do some updates. Apparently, this one was to make sure my camera doesn't work.
Well, what?
Uh,
Why do you hate
but
cybersecurity, Ev? What?
I
What?
do
What?
have a
What?
thing against
Why are you for cyber criminals and malicious state actors attacking your computer?
because I'm not worthy of being attacked. So I can
Yeah, because
play.
because that's what the bad guys do. They say, "Oh, is this teenager worthy of a malicious attack?"
All
Yeah,
sextortion victims are worthy of being. They that's their fault. It's their fault. They just have to be like, no, it's I'm if I don't do anything wrong, I ne nothing bad will happen to me. That's
like,
how cybersecurity works.
oh, okay. I think that's right. I think
I'm all for victim shaming.
victims, cybersecurity victims, Ev
All
Gaumond,
victims, rape victims as well.
yeah, all victims, it's your fault. This is the word pronounced on high, though in the darkness, by Ev Gaumond. So, Ev, is your world as dark as your presence today?
No, 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 no. Life is good. Life is good. Nothing dark.
So
Um,
my guess is if you hit refresh, your screen will, your camera will magically start working, but that's just a guess.
well, I'm on my phone, so there's no refresh button, but I can disappear myself and come back.
Yeah, why don't you try that? Um,
Let's go.
all right. Ev has disappeared herself. Oh, and we're joined by Mike Feinberg. Hello, Mike Feinberg.
How's it going?
So good. We were just talking about uh, whether it is a good thing that the FBI and Justice Department leadership are consumed in fratricidal conspiracy mongering and narrating their whole lives to Laura Loomer in the process.
who could very well end up deputy director of the FBI at the rate this is going.
I have all the same qualifications that Dan Bongino has to be deputy director of the FBI, save one, which is I have never been a line Secret Service agent. Um, and I would
Learning
like
how
to,
to stand in hallways is very easy.
yeah, and I just want to say that I do have some qualifications that Dan Bongino does not have. For example, I have run an organization.
You've
Um,
thought critically about the FBI. You
I
care
have
about the
thought
rule of
critically
law.
about the FBI. I have followed FBI investigations very closely. So yeah, I mean there are. Look, I acknowledge there are some deficiencies I have with respect to my qualifications to be deputy FBI director, but I also do have some unusual qualifications relative to Dan Bongino, and I just if I do say so myself, I'm a much better podcaster than he is. Um, but seriously, Mike, leaving aside,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I can argue it either way. I can say, on the one hand, you would really want an FBI agent, an FBI leadership a in a rational world that was focused not on stabbing each other in the back
Yeah.
and a kind of Real Housewives of the Justice Department FBI show kind of thing. You'd want them, I don't know, focused on malign foreign influence,
We don't do that anymore.
preventing terrorist attacks, you know, arresting bad guys, public corruption stuff. But
Yep.
we don't really seem to do any of that stuff anymore. And so, under these circumstances, is it better to have them focused on their day job as they understand it, which is to say, rooting out people like you,
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, uh, or is it better, to risk that the world may not be safe from Erez Ravanis and Mike Feinbergs and that we might uh, you know not we might lose focus on dropping important public corruption cases, and we not might not be providing adequate support to ICE in going after people's gardeners and folks that are trying to make a living, or is it better that they should be consumed by with attacking one another and lose sight of the ball as they understand the ball? What do you think?
You can, I'm genuinely torn because I think both have the same effect of driving good people out of the organization. On the one, like, I was driven out because I was specifically targeted. But I also have friends who've left because they're so fed up with seeing their senior management and their supposed leadership just going down these rabbit holes of baseless conspiracy theories. Um, any way you look at it, the FBI is going to have to be rebuilt. And the only question is, on the optimistic side, like, can we do that in 5 to 10 years after these guys are gone? Or is it the work of a generation? And I genuinely don't know the answer. But I know, like, that's the question even people who are still in are posing every day.
So, Mike, I want to introduce you to the estimable Ev Gaumond, who
We spoke about your Quebecois accent yesterday, I believe.
we did.
Her
We did. It came up
But now that
in.
I've said that, I can't remember if it was on camera or off
It
camera.
was,
I
well, it was
didn't let
on
anything
camera,
slip.
but it was
Okay.
in a lawfare editorial meeting, and we didn't speak about
Hmm.
your accent so much as we spoke about the way a certain member of the cast of the French Village
Oh, okay.
responded to your French. And this was all prompted by the fact that the estimable Natalie Orpet was in Quebec over the weekend and had some trouble understanding Quebecois French, though
He speaks French.
she's quite fluent in French, yes, but felt very unfluent in the local version of the language, and so I told the great story of that just how contemptuous I forget her name was of your accent, and how appalled I was, and how relatively uh, unfussed about it you were. This was something that would just never happen in the English speaking world. Ev was translating for Sarah Longwell and me with the cast of The French Village, and one of them burst out like she had just seen a pink elephant or something. Oh my God, you are so Canadian. Um, and I couldn't imagine that happening in the Anglophone world. Um, I mean, you might think it. Oh my God, you sound like you just came off the street in Liverpool, but you'd never say it. And so, yeah, that's the context in which your accent came up. Eve Gaumond is a French Canadian AI legal policy scholar who lives these days in Ottawa. Um, so
She's a
she
beautiful city.
so she represents all things uh, uh, bilingual in Canadian culture, along with the estimable Alicia Wanless. She represents our Canadian co-host contingent. And Ev, I've got to ask you: is the story of the Real Housewives of the Justice Department breaking through to Canadian audiences, or is this are people talking about how the senior echelon of American law enforcement is overwhelmed with hatred of each other over the Epstein files, or has this not crossed the parallel yet?
To know, and I've been actually wondering about everything going on south of the border. Um, I on Blue Sky, my feed on Blue Sky is full of people talking about the Epstein files. But if I'm talking with, I was at the with my family during the weekend, and I was with my aunts. They were talking about what was going on in the States, and they had not heard a single thing about it.
That's interesting. So
So
when they're talking about what's going on in the States, are they talking about the new tariff situation, or just the larger craziness? I mean, what's the as as if we take your aunts to be representative of general mainstream Quebecois public opinion, and we put inordinate weight on their conversation as representative of that, as good pollsters will do. Um, like, what is salient to them about what's going on in this country?
they're just lost. I think that the easiest way to talk with Quebecois people about it's tourism. We're not going there as much as we used to. They're not coming here as much as you're used to. That's the easiest way of like having a cogent conversation about what's going on in the States. Then it's like just a mishmash of everything, and like it's hard to really make a coherent story. They're just like, oh, it goes very bad there. Um, and it often comes back to like, yeah, they're carrying guns. It's it's something like not necessarily like in the streets or it's different than before, but it's probably the one thing that really distinguishes Canadians from Americans in the collective psyche. Like they're carrying guns. it's something that they care about their guns, that they think it's important. That's something that really often comes back because it's so foreign to us. Um, it's so like, yeah, politics is weird, everything's going weird. And can you imagine, in addition to all of that, they're carrying guns. Um,
And
so
how long has it been since, you know, normal people in Quebec had guns?
oh God,
I mean, there's some point at
I
which U.S. and Canadian uh, political cultures diverged on the subject of guns. I don't know when that was. It seems it's like before I was a grown up, at least.
I have no recollection of anyone ever talking about. Oh, no, that's not true. No, I know that my grandfather, who spent some time in the States during the after the crash, had a gun back like in the basement, and it when like afterwards when he died, my family was looking for it. So there was a known fact about him owning a gun. But I think the main difference is not necessarily having one or not having one, but probably more um, enshrining it in the Constitution. So if you had like taken his gun, he wouldn't have mine.
Right.
I
There
think that's the
wasn't a
main
sense of it
difference.
as wrapped up in your inalienable rights as an American.
Yeah.
Well, I am sitting at the cabin in the woods, unlike at Ev's cottage, which is what Canadians call cabins in the woods. Um, at the cabin in the woods, you will often hear gunfire um, because everybody except me has guns, and deer are pests here, and people will often just lean out their windows and shoot them. And when I came back to the cabin in the woods after the flood and destruction of the cabin, there were bullet holes in my windows. And it wasn't because anybody was targeting me. It was just because
Things
shooting
happen.
out shooting out windows is something that periodically happens. Um, and you will sometimes hear gunfire here. It is never menacing, but it is, you know, very different from DC, where whenever you hear gunfire, it is menacing. Um, and it's very different, I think, from the cottage in the lake in Quebec, where you just don't hear gunfire. Um, uh, a lot of people riding around with guns here, and you can get them at the local Walmart. Um, Mike, you're a gun owner.
I've got four, yeah. But I mean,
Um,
also, I think we should qualify that. I was an FBI agent for the better part of 2 decades, and I had my bureau issue weapon, which I turned in when I resigned, as I was required to. I also, the bureau allows you to personally own certain models that have different features for different purposes. So, like, in addition to my service weapon they gave me, I had a subcompact that I bought myself that was entirely for concealment purposes. And then I had an M4, which is a long gun that was for raids and high risk operations. And since I left because I turned some stuff in, and given the nature of the political scene and some of the people I'm talking about, I do have concerns about my own safety. I bought another handgun and short barreled rifle with a couple extra features, let's say. All totally legal. I mean, I got the necessary ATF tax stamps and everything, but I basically built a short barrel rifle with, a holographic optic sight and a sound suppressor and
And do
tactical
you
flashlight.
and when you acquire, I mean, you granted are differently situated from, um, a former FBI agent who has genuine security concerns and
Yeah.
understandable ones given the circumstances that he now finds himself in is
Mhm.
not necessarily the people that Ev's aunts are talking about. Um,
No, no.
but
I mean, I'm not. Yeah. Sorry.
do you have a sense of your gun ownership as specific to your situation, or do you have a sense of it as kind of wrapped up in your rights as an American, or both?
Um, I've honestly never thought about it. That's a really interesting question, but it's like if you took somebody who was a lawyer or in private equity or finance or whatever, and after 2 decades working for whatever firm they worked for, you took away their laptop or phone, it would feel really weird. And that's how it sort of is with me in a sidearm. This is something I carried literally everywhere, every waking moment of my life for a very long time. And, unless I knew I was going to be drinking, it was with me. Concerts, ball games, family gatherings, it was just something I had in the small of my back at all times. And that gives me a level of comfort having it. And I don't think it's because it's necessarily something I view as a defensive weapon or I feel weaker. It's just, it was an appendage that was with me.
Right. I
And
don't
they
go anywhere
actually,
without my laptop.
yeah, they inculcate that, when we're at the academy, when we're being trained, even when we're not in a firearms or defensive tactics class, we're wearing a plastic gun at all times just to get used to it. So I feel sort of naked at the risk of using a cliche, not
Mhm.
having one within reach.
Yeah, I mean it's a so Ev, when your aunts talk about it as weird when they have guns, who are they thinking about? Are they thinking about, former FBI agents who've just been fired? Is that part of their universe of the they, or are they thinking more specifically about Trump supporting Americans of a
They're definitely not thinking about former FBI agents. Honestly, FBI, CIA, these are all things that will, like, it's stuff that happens in movies, but they are not real people. FBI, CIA,
My
in
family feels the
their
same way
mind,
about me.
right? Um, no, when they're talking about like, and they have guns,
See, they got to
um,
watch
this
Dog Shirt TV because we have former FBI, we have former CIA, we have full spectrum representation of the intelligence community. And we have gun carrying agents, we have analysts. Like, that's in Washington, in the intelligence community, there's really three types of people. There's gun carrying agents, there's analysts, I guess there's collectors too,
Yeah, I mean,
operating
I mean,
people,
case officers are not
case
going to
officers,
carry
and then
weapons.
there's management who everybody hates. And that's the fundamental division in, and we have good representation of all three. We can get, you wanna run ops, we can get you John Cipher, or you wanna, or Mark Polymeropoulos. You want analysts, we got Holly. You want gun carriers, we got Mike, and we even have access to some real knuckle draggers if we need them. So
I had a
we've
lot,
got.
I had a lot at my wedding. It's we're,
Sorry, you were saying, Ev.
no. So I think that they're more talking about rednecks in the woods. Um,
So people
that's
like
really
where I am. I
your
mean,
words, not mine. But I guess
oh yeah,
yes.
this is
Um,
serious redneck country.
but
They would
I gotta say that
they
they
would
don't.
proudly describe themselves that way.
Okay, fine. But I gotta say that they are kind of confused with like I, my aunt was saying, "Oh, they really have different values than ours." So do you have like their my family, my country, and uh, what's the list? Like, I care first
God,
about my
family,
family, about
country.
my country. Yeah, and I was like, I don't think it's really the norm. Like, you're talking about a specific kind of American. This is not widely shared as a belief system. And just take it as an example, USA was really about sharing with the rest of the world. It's not as egoistical as what you think it is. So they don't really make a difference between East Coast, redneck. All of the Americans are packaged in the same bag. So that lacks nuances a bit sometimes.
It's interesting. Go, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I just it's funny. I wonder. I probably have less of a problem with American gun culture than probably anybody else you have on the show. It's not something I'm a huge fan of. I did not grow up with them. I grew up in very liberal environs. There was one of the unfortunately earliest school shootings in U.S. history was in the district right next to mine when I was a kid. But I've gotten to know people who really do value it, and they're not bad people. I actually feel safe around them, but they've also worked in law enforcement, so who knows how to weigh that. But one thing I've really been wondering is how much of American gun culture is based on the actual historical traditions and rights that Clarence Thomas is so fond of quoting, and how much of it is honestly based on like 1950s and 60s media. When you look at like the archetypal American film from that period, it's a Western. And, the lone individual saving the community with nothing but his wits and his revolver. Like, you look at the major films for like a decade, 2 decades, that's what the theme was.
Right.
And I wonder, like, if we can point at when the culture started to shift. Because if you look at the history of the NRA, for example, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, like they were originally very much in favor of gun regulation and
And
gun safety
they were
training.
primarily a gun safety and education and training. I
Exactly.
mean, my
Exactly.
I learned to shoot in an NRA program as a kid, and I didn't think of them as a pro-gun advocacy organization. I thought of them as the people uh, who organized my
Yeah.
riflery program.
Like a tactical Boy Scouts. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is why, like, despite generally being pretty originalist and definitely being textualist, like, I don't know that the historical analogies, for example, used in Brune are actually that valid. Um, I
so
don't know that we've really delved into American gun culture as like a longitudinal study of any sort.
so I think it's a very interesting question, and I think the one I agree with you that a lot of what we think of as traditional American gun culture is actually a kind of cultural manufacture
Mhm.
of the 30s, 40s,
Yep.
and 50s. That said, there is a dramatic urban-rural split
Yep.
on just comfort level with guns. So I am not a fan of gun
Yeah.
culture, but I did grow up around a lot of guns, not because my immediate family had guns in either New York City or Maryland, but because I learned to shoot in an NRA program at my camp, and because extended family, including my uncle John, did subsistence hunting. My uncle lives in a shack in the woods in Montana, and would go out every few months and shoot an elk, which would stock his freezer for the next. And I remember being in the bathroom in his Montana house, and on the door of the bathroom is hanging a big hunting rifle, and thinking, "Wow, that's weird," and asking him about it, and he's like, "Well, where do you want me to put it?" And you
I've had
know,
this conversation with my wife as recently as yesterday.
I mean, and this was not macho gun culture. This was like more like you go into somebody's fancy New York kitchen and they have like a Henkel chopping knife, and you're like, "Wow, you have a knife?" And they're like, "Yeah, I cook dinner." Um, and I do think that there is some of it is just an unbroken tradition of, you know, rural values that aren't about adoration of guns, they're about use of guns. If you know, have, you know, crops and they're rabbits that are taking them, you shoot rabbits, right? I mean, there was that whole incident a few years ago where that poor guy who raised the question about, you know, feral pigs, feral hogs attacking his kids. And, what do you recommend instead of an AR-15 for that situation? And all of liberal opinion went nuts on him. And, he was I saw an interview with him in which he said, "No, I actually am for reasonable gun control. The feral hogs in my area of Texas are a real problem, and they do attack children, and we use AR-15s to deal with them sometimes. I was just asking people what they recommend." And I do think that there is a real, like, there is very little good use for normal people of a firearm in a city.
Can
There
I
are specialized self-defense situations like yours that are exceptions, but basically the proper amount of guns in Washington, D.C. is very small. The proper amount of guns out here is not very small, and people have, all kinds of reasonable uses for them that aren't cultural chest banging. And I think there's just a real like a cultural misunderstanding of some of what gun culture is.
and that's actually got real world policy implications that I think the anti-gun crowd has failed to grapple with, which is like if you want to regulate firearms, and again, I'm very agnostic on this issue. Um, if you want to regulate firearms and you want to have more government control over it, you need to be able to talk about it. And the gun control crowd, I don't want to use the word movement, I don't think it's that organized, but like the gun control crowd has never really learned to do that. And as a result, they tend to go after and try and regulate things that to those of us who actually do shoot guns on a regular basis just don't make much sense. Um, there are if you're really concerned about gun violence, there are regulations of the actual hardware you can try and go for. But to those of us who do shoot on a regular basis, it seems like what they go after are more aesthetic concerns. Like, they want to regulate the things that look dangerous in movies instead of the things that actually would increase safety. The sort of prime example of this is a suppressor. If you look at firearms laws in Europe, if you have a gun, they actually encourage you to use a suppressor. Um, Going deaf from shooting is a real thing. There is a reason when we're out on a range, we're wearing, both internal and external ear protection. So, like, I don't know that expending political capital on banning or making it more difficult to get a suppressor in any given state makes anybody less safe. There are other things they can go after that don't sound as sexy that would.
Well, and if you're serious about reducing gun deaths,
Mm-hmm.
um, the overwhelming problem is handguns,
Yep,
not AR-15s.
exactly.
And the low-hanging fruit is suicides,
Mm-hmm.
and domestic violence,
Yeah,
not, you know, street, um, uh,
right.
and so, like, I do think that there's a, um, you know, if you were designing gun laws around harm reduction
Mm-hmm.
rather than around what looks scariest,
Yeah,
um, you would actually have, I don't know if different policies, but different emphasis,
yeah.
and it wouldn't be all driven by school shootings because
Mhm.
that actually accounts for a very, very small percentage of gun deaths, though they're quite spectacular when they happen. The huge, overwhelming problem with guns is that when people have them around, they tend to be used in suicides and in very local homicides, generally involving people who live in their houses. Ev, I'm curious about the rural, you spend time between rural locations in Quebec
Yep.
and urban locations. What is the prevalence of shotguns and long guns in rural places in Quebec where they would certainly where guns would certainly be present? I mean, people live in parts of Quebec where there are polar bear issues. Up north,
Yeah, well, the only time I spoke with someone who has polar bear issues, it's become a running gag because the way apparently he was a park ranger and he was taking care of tourists going up north to visit, and the gag was like, if you see a polar bear, you punch him in the nose. That's the way to it. So we were not talking about guns, but that being said, I realized while you were talking that actually I know several people with guns. Uh, Urban, rural, both of them, lots of friends or family, and like hunting is a thing. But first of all, it's something like you will never see their gun. They will carry them in like a suitcase, and it will be hidden in a box at home, locked box. Um, and it just doesn't seem to be thought of as gun. So we were talking, and it was like, no, gun is completely different here. We don't have them. In fact, we do have them, but we
just don't have a
see
fetish
them,
about them.
yeah, and you will never like see it on a wall or something like that. It's hidden, and people don't talk about it. But people take classes to learn to shoot guns. It's just the same way someone would talk about their skis. Like they don't talk about it if they're not ski freaks. They don't talk about it all the time. They don't talk about the model. They don't talk about
So it's guns
their
without
collection
gun
of
culture.
great.
It's interesting. Yeah, I always get freaked out when I walk into a house and see a lot of guns on display. That seems to me to be making a statement that you know, like that that is a different thing from having guns for whatever purpose you have them.
And I think that the handgun also has a different uh is perceived differently. And I was wondering,
So
Mike,
that's interesting.
do you
What do you know
remember?
about
Well, the handgun is something bad guys use to rob a grocery store. or it's there. I don't think we see a good purpose for handgun in
It's
Quebec,
not a
Canada, but we
sporting
don't.
tool. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm. It's just that we don't have the same sort of law for like FBI agents are not something we're thinking of
When we had,
here. But
when I
yeah,
was a
yeah, go ahead.
teenager, and DC was the murder capital of the United States, a status that we lost sometime in the 90s. There was this fabulous shirt that was for sale in, and our basketball team, by the way, was named the Washington Bullets, which
Was it after the Bullets or was it after the Clash song called Washington Bullets?
well, I
If I don't drop at least one obscure music reference during
yeah,
every
so I
podcast,
don't
I'm
know
not going to
where
be
the
very
name
nice.
the Washington Bullets came from. It that
Okay.
changed in the 90s because it was, just kind of not the image that we
Yeah, a little
wanted.
uncouth. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was. It came to be, but there was this shirt that used to be for sale at all the tourist shotska shops, which it just said on the front Washington D.C. and it had a big picture of a handgun, and on the back it said, "It ain't fucking Kansas, Dorothy." And I thought it was like, um, that was like the spirit of DC in the 80s. Um, and that's my DC. I love the grim humor of the crack era in DC. That was, when we had a mayor who smoked crack, which is something that Ontario residents know something about, although not Ottawa residents. Those of us who still remember, I don't know, I forget what they call it now, that hotel that used to be the Vista, but we would walk by, you walk by that hotel with people who are visiting DC for the first time, and you say that used to be the Vista Hotel, where the mayor of DC was caught on film smoking crack, and he looks at the camera and the cops, and he says, "Bitch, set me up."
My
Um,
regular bar in DC had a drink special every night that was called Bitch Set Me Up.
Yeah, I mean that, and this is the DC I grew up in. All the no, it was all crime, crack, murders, and mayors of infinite corruption. And now we have, nice glass buildings. We have, you can walk at night and it's safe. You don't hear gunfire very often. The number of murders is really low, and I, I don't know. I miss it.
I think we lived in different neighborhoods in DC, Ben, because gunfire was not foreign to the audio environment in my living room.
Where did you live?
I was like on the Petworth Columbia Heights border, right off 14th Street.
Yeah, so it would
There
be
were definitely a couple shootings like within the vicinity that I heard as they occurred.
oh yeah. I mean, I don't say it never happens,
Yeah.
although in my neighborhood it never happens. But like, but it doesn't happen every day,
Yeah.
right? It's not a normal thing for you
Right.
to hear a shooting. If you'd been there in 83, you wouldn't have walked in that part of Petworth.
I know. Towards the end of my time in DC, I don't know if you remember, DC is like the only jurisdiction in the world that requires law enforcement or wants law enforcement officers to serve on grand juries. So I was on a 35-day impaneled grand jury for local DC crimes. It was federal, but like DC does it weird. Normally you
Right.
do it one day a week. DC, you're just there for 35 days. And so for 35 days from 9 to 5, I'm hearing nothing but like murder and rape stories. And even I, as somebody who was armed all the time, like I didn't really want to go out in DC after that because it does give you a skewed view of what it's like.
What's the crime situation in Ottawa? What counts as a shocking crime in your new life as a slumlord?
I'm not really familiar with the crime situation here. I know that in the Byward Market, which is like the touristy part, also somewhere where a lot of poverty and homelessness happens. There were real security concerns, and people were afraid of walking in the dark. And like r- last summer, someone was really drug or alcohol inebriated, stabbed a pair of tourists. And so they've increased quite significantly the police presence in the market. Um, Prostitution is very prevalent in not my neighborhood, but the street just below. All related to drug. The opiate crisis is quite important, but murders, I haven't heard any shooting yet. Maybe tonight.
Well, I think a national capital should also be a murder capital. It's always bothered me that we've ceded this title to, you know, Baltimore and New Orleans and Memphis and these second rate cities that don't have our history. And I think we should take it back. Look, folks, we're going to be back tomorrow, and we have a special guest coming tomorrow, the estimable Emily Hogue, who, you know, has a number of distinctions in life, including one that will surprise a bunch of you. But you will, the main one, the reason she's coming on the show, is that she is releasing today on Lawfare an extremely interesting article about Russian recognition of the Taliban government and how that squares ideologically with the concurrent move by Putin to venerate for the first time the Soviet war in Afghanistan, and how you at once recognize the Taliban and reimagine the war in Afghanistan as a just war, which, by the way, is super difficult to do. Emily is a really interesting person and a Russia historian, and a kind of deep thinker on matters modern Russian ideology. And so it will be a great conversation. Come join us for it. Folks, that'll be tomorrow. Before we go, there's something I forgot to tell you, which is that the sun is not shining, but the birds sure are chirping. It's gonna be a great fucking day, and this is Dogshirt TV. It is a goddamn revolution in morning television.